Hey guys, welcome back. This video we will learn about hooks. Okay, so hooks basically are the function that allow you to hook into React state and lifecycle feature from the function component. So hooks always start with use prefix. Okay, I will show you in a minute, and also it must be invoked in React functional component only. All right. So here we have the text, just print out, you click 0 times, all right? So let's just have a quick look here, okay? So this is what it's showing, and now let's start writing React hooks, okay? So here you can see I have imported the useState from React, all right? So useState is a hook that let you to manage the state in a functional component. So to use this, first we basically import it on top here, and inside the app component we need to declare counts, and then we want to set the count. Okay, so basically this is the counter, and we can now start using the useState that we declare here, right? And by default, let's just set this to 0. Okay, so it starts from number 0. And to use this, right, and down here we can just start writing, it can be a button, right, using it with the on click event. So on clicked, and this is the arrow function, we can start using the set count. So every time that we click on the button, then the number increases. Okay, so here inside the set count, we're going to use the count here. So count plus 1. Basically, when we click on that, the number increase from 0 to 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. Okay, and we just call the button as click me, right? And down right here we need to also change it as well. So instead of number 0, it need to be dynamic. So here we can just start using the curly bracket, and we call the count, right? So now let's just have a look. Okay, so here is so far it say 0 time, but when I click on this, it increase, right? So every time I click on it, the number increases. So this is using the useState. It changes the state, right? So when I click on this, it change one state, another, right, and more like this. So this is using the useState. So next I want to show you is to use the useEffect. So useEffect is also a popular hooks as well, besides using the useState. So useEffect is a hook that let you access the lifecycle method in a functional component. Okay, so right here inside the app component, we can start writing useEffect. So this is also using the arrow function as well. And before we can use the useEffect here, make sure you need to import this as well, so it automatically import when I write this, right? And inside the useEffect, just to show you quickly using the console log. So in this console log, let's just say this initialize. Okay, simple as that. And say if we render this the first time, right, it will show us this one here. And we are not done yet. So here we need to also write an empty array. So this runs during the mount only. So every time that we reload the page, it runs only once. All right, so this is what it does. Now let's compile this and then have a look. So I'll use the inspect console, right? So you can see it say initialize. Let me just refresh the page. And the reason you see like saying initialize twice, this is because we are now using it in the dev environment. That's why it's showing us twice. But in the production, it only shows once. But how do we fix this in the dev if we want to only have it shown once? What you can do is open the index.js, and you can see here, right, in the production, run once. In the dev, it render twice to detect any problem in the code. Okay, so we can just uncomment this out. But before that, let's just quickly coming back here just to show you one more thing. So inside the useEffect, we can also write the return here as well. Here we just say clean up, okay, as simple as that. So the clean up here, the inside return here, it runs before the component is unmounted. So let me just show you what I mean by that. Now I have saved the code and refresh this, and here take a look. First it initialize and then it clean up, right? But if we only want it to run once, we can disable this strict mode, okay? So it means that it only render once. Now let's have a look again. Let me refresh this, and you can see it's showing only initialize, but it's not showing the cleanup, right? So basically the step is first it show the initialize, and then it clean up everything inside this return, okay? Now what happened, okay, if I say click on the button, right, and want to increase it every time using it with the useEffects? How do I do that? So if, okay, imagine right now I want to show the count, right, inside this useEffects. So we'll just say you clicked, and this is a number of time, right? So count time, but because we are using it with the count, we have to change this to this symbol here with the $sign, okay? So we want to show the number of time when I click on this. What happened when we do that right now? So refresh this, click on this button. You can see it actually showing nothing inside the console log. But this one here, we can just put this, we can just remove this for now, okay? And you can see it actually showing nothing, right? So this is because we are using the empty array. When we click on the button, the state change, but then it is not changing, or it's not calling this in the useEffects at all. So how do we fix this problem? Well, we just need to write another useEffect, okay? So quickly write one here. And inside this useEffect, instead of using it with the empty array, right, we can use the count, okay? And inside this useEffect, we can now do the same thing. Let's just quickly copy this part here and get rid of this, okay? So now let's have a look. So the code here, what it does, when we click on the button, this useEffect, right, with the not empty array, the array with the count inside here, it run every time, okay, when the count, the state changes. Now let's have a look again. Refresh this. Here in this slide, you click 0 time, okay, so this is the default. And when I click on the click me, and as seen here, it is calling that useEffect every time, right? And the number, it increases because the state changes, okay? So yep, this is the useEffect. This one here with the empty array, it only run once, and this one here, right, it run every time when we call it, when the state changes. In this case, we are using it with the button with the on-click event, and it is changing, all right, keep increasing, so it call this every time. So yep, that is the useEffects. Basically, again, it's a hook that let us to access the lifecycle method in the functional component. So every time that the page load, right, it call this one. This is the first thing that it does. And inside here, the return, it will just clean up. So what if, okay, I enable this again and see what happened, okay? I'll do the same thing. Refresh this. First it initialize, and then it go to the you click 0 time, and then it clean up. Okay, so it's supposed to be only this, right? But then because we enable the strict mode, that's why it runs twice. And when I click on this, okay, it showing us a list here, right? It keep console log the result. So yeah, I hope you learn a lot from these hooks. So this is only the first part of using hooks. There are more video on how to use the React hook as well. So in this video, we have looked at the useState hooks and also useEffects. So we're going to learn about hooks again, but this time we will be learning useContext. Okay. So to use the useContext, first let's just quickly import this, and I'll explain you what the use of useContext. So first we need to import create context and also useContext from React. Okay. And down here you can see we are basically showing the text saying hi. And now on top of the app here, we can define the theme. All right, so theme context, and then create context, and we can assign this to null. Okay, so what is create context and what is useContext? So before we deep dive into this, first we need to understand what is React context. So React context is a way to manage stage globally. Okay, so manage the stage globally. And for the useContext, it allow you to create a context that the components can provide or can read. So now let's inside the app here. Okay, so in the return, we want to return the theme context here that we define, and inside the theme here we can call any component. So in this case I'll call just the component, and we need to create this component, right? The component called component. So this will be functions component, and inside the component we can start defining the useContext. So let's just give this a name. I'll call this a theme, and then the useContext. And inside the useContext, since we have already created the create context, right, using the create context here, call theme context, so we can now use it. So inside the useContext, just paste the theme context, as simple as that. And this one, it will return. So we want to return div tag, and inside the div tag, let's just use p tag and say the current theme is, and here it will be the theme. Okay, so just call it here, and then here we want to also define whether we want to use the here the value here, right? We define it as null, so we want to assign a value to it. So it's the theme context dot provider value. We want to assign this to, it can be light or it can be dark, right? Just use as light for now. And here we also need to use the dot provider as well. Okay, so here it says create context. Okay, so here let's just fix this, create context. Okay, so this is the correct spelling. And basically let's have a look again. We created this theme context dot provider equal give the value as light, and before we can use the theme context here, we will have to create the create context. Okay, so that we can use it with the use context. So inside the another component, right? So this here, it wrap around the component. So the component here inside, we use the use context. Okay, and whatever that we define on top here, we use it in here. and then we want to show whatever the value that we assign. So the theme here, we want to have the value as light. So the result would be the current theme is light. Okay, so this is basically like the theme, right, that wrap around what a component, and then it passed to this component. Okay, so the value passed to this component. So now let's have a look here. All right, so here this is the result. The current theme is light, and if I change this to say like dark, right, let's have a look again. It's showing us dark. Okay, so that's pretty much about the use context. So again, for the create context, it allows you to create a context that component can provide or it can read. And for the use context here, it's allow you to read and also subscribe to the context from the component itself, from this component. Okay, it can read and it can subscribe to a context. Okay, so now I give you more example instead of using this one, right? Just to show you what are the benefits of using this in real life. Okay, so this is another example. Instead of using the use context, in this example, I show you using the useState. Okay, so if you don't want to use context, then you can also use state as well, but the code is quite different. Let me show you the useState first. Here you can see we have the defining the default value, call this as John, similar to the use context, right? The use context here, the value is set to dark, right? And this is showing as John. For the variable here, we can start using it in this component, the app component. So basically, it will show hello John, okay? And we want to pass this John, the value here, to other nested components, okay, to the child components. All right, so here we pass the John through the property, okay, of the component 2, and then we start using that value John, and we also pass it to another component inside the component 2. So this is the component 3, and we pass again to the component 4, and then 5. Okay, and finally in the component 5 we have the value, it's still John here, right? And here it will show hello John again. Okay, so this is what it is will show on the screen. So let's have a look. Right, here it is. So hello John, component 2, 3, 4, 5, and finally it passed to the here, okay, component 5. It's showing hello John again. So this is you can see it's quite difficult to pass from one component to the other component, especially the nested one, right? If you have a lot of nested components, then this is what you have to write. Okay, but now let me show you the code using the useContext, which similar to this. We have 5 components as well. Let's have a look. Okay, this example is using create context and use context, and now let's have a look what are the difference. Okay, so here we define the create context, all right, and right here we are still using John, but in the return here we use the user context that we define on top here, dot provider value equal to John, or you can just write John directly here, right? But let's just keep it as is, and then basically this is showing hello John. And we also have another component, the nested component as well, or the child component, right? It's called component 2. Now let's have a look at the component 2. So component 2, we have the component 3, but you can see the difference is that it doesn't have any prop right here. Okay, so we don't need to pass any value through the prop in the component 2. Okay, we can just go in and in, right? So this is the component 3, and inside the component 3 we have component 4, and then we have 5. Okay, so inside the component 5, now we start using the use context. Okay, so we just need to define the use context, and this is the name that we define on top here, right? User context, and now we can start using the user here. So the value inside the user here, it is John. Okay, so here we return showing us component 5, and then it show hello John again. You can see how simple it is when using the useContext. Okay, so let's have a look at the result, right? We have hello John, component 2, 3, 4, 5, and then finally hello John again. We don't need to pass through the prop, right? We can just define it globally, and we can also start using it inside any nested component. Okay, this is the difference, and you can see how useful it is when we use the useContext in this particular scenario. So yeah, that's pretty much about the create context. We will have a look at useReducer. So what is useReducer? useReducer is basically a hook that let you manage complex state in functional components, and it also let you to optimize the performance as well, and it uses the reduct pattern. So now we have the button here, right? And when I click on this button, the number increases, and if I click on this, it decreases. Okay, so let's have a look at the code. And first we need to import useReducer from React, and in the app component here we define count dispatch equal to useReducer. Okay, so here we have the state action, and the action here, okay, we are using switch case. So in the action, the first action is increment. So what does increment does? It basically increases the number every time that we call this action. Okay, and if the action decreases is called, this case, right, then it reduces it by 1, or it deducts it by 1. Otherwise it just throw an error. And down here, this is number 0. Basically this is the default value. Okay, so the default value of the current state, right? Down here we have the return, right? We have the 2 buttons. So the first buttons here, it is using dispatch. Dispatch is basically, it's called an action. Okay, it's basically start an action. So when we click on the button, then it call this action, and it start performing whatever that we defined in this case. Okay, so the first case here is the increment, right? And if say I click on this button instead, it will dispatch, it will start this action called decrement, and inside the decrement we reduce the number by 1. Okay, so now let's try to click on the button. So when I click on this, the number increased by 1 because we are calling this action. Okay, and if I click on this, then it reduced by 1, so on and so forth, right? So this is one form of using the useReducer. And now let me also show you the other way as well. So we need to write more code compared to this one. You can think of this as like the shortcut how you write using the useReducer. Okay, so let's have a look at another example. Okay, so this is one more example. As you can see, we have defined the initialized state count equal to 0, right? We assign number 0 to this. This is the initial state. And in the reducer here, this is a separate function. Okay, so we have the state, the same one, action, but in the switch we are using action.type. Okay, and then the case is basically returning the current state, right? State.count plus 1. And this is the case for the decrement. It reduced or deducted by 1. Okay, and otherwise the default would be showing the error. Okay, so if we don't call this, or if we don't call this, then it just throw the error. And in the app component here, so this is the old code, right? The previous code I show you. And here we have state, dispatch, useReducer, and we just call the reducer, basically the function, right? And the previous example here, we just define everything inside here, okay? And then we also have the initial state. So it's similar to this one, right? It's just that we use the initial state, we defined it on top here, equal to 0. If you don't want to write it like this, then you can just simply put number 0, basically the same one as this, right? The reducer here, we just split it into a separate function. And the difference here, we have the action.type. So this one here, we don't need to use the .type, right? And also the return, we don't even use the count, right? So this is the difference. This is another way you can write using the useReducer. And in the button, so the first one is the patch, and we use the type and then the name of it, which is the increment, and this is another type, decrement. So the code basically the same thing, right? It does the same job. So this is a little bit long form, right? We have to define the type, we have to use the action.type, we have to also here count. I think that's pretty much about the useReducer. And if you want to learn more about the useReducer or the Redux, you can also check out my other crash courses on this topic. Okay, we will look at useCallback hook. So what is useCallback? React useCallback hook, it returns a memoized callback function. You can think of like memorizations as caching a value so that it doesn't need to be recalculated or re-render. Okay, and the useCallback hook, it only runs when one of its dependencies update. This means when the props have changed. Okay, so what does this do? This can improve the performance because it isolated like the resource function, so it will not automatically run on every render. It's a bit confusing, but once I show you the example, it will be very clear. Okay, so here we have the app component, right? We declare the set count, we need to do as well. So the set count is basically counting the number, keep increasing the number. And for the to do, it will store the value, and now it is the array type. And we have two functions. So one is the increment. Basically, when we click on or call the function, it will increase the number by 1 each time. Okay, and the add to do, this function, it will, all right, this text called new to do, it will be added to the existing one. Right now we haven't really used the useCallback yet, but I want to show you the normal one first. Okay, the one that is without using the useCallback, and then I will show you how to use this one. Here in the to do, here we call the to do component, right, in the app component here. So the to do, we pass the data, the to do, right, the to do here, now storing as empty array. We pass it via the props, and we also have the add to do. Okay, so this one is not the value, it's not storing value, but this is the function I showed you earlier as well. Every time that we click or call this function, it will add this new to do to the existing array. And down here we have the count, basically showing the number when we click on the button, right? So clicking on the plus button here, it will call this function. This function is to increase the number by 1 every time. So have a look at the to do component. So in the to do component, we have the props. Okay, so the prop, first one is the to do, second one is the function add to do, and here we return the list of to do that we have. Okay, so it will add a new text called new to do to this. Okay, so it will show this in a new line every time that we click on this button. Okay, so the button called add to do, once we click on that, it will call this function called add to do, right? And this is what it does. It will add this text every time, and this is basically we want to show it. Okay, to show whatever that is in the array to the screen, right? So now let's have a look without using the useCallback, what it's gonna show us. And also here we have the console log called child render as well. Okay, so here it is. We have the button. Whenever I click on it, right, it adds a new text called new to do to the list. And we also have the count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Now I want to show you by inspecting. I want to show you the console, right? So in the console we have child render, right? So now when I click on this button, and you can notice down here, so I click on the add to do, and the child render appear, all right, meaning that it re-render. When I click on this, it also re-render as well. So even though I click on this button a few times, right, it still re-render every time I click on the button. The same for the count as well. Okay, so we don't want this to happen. We want to improve the performance. We want to eliminate or try to get rid of this issue without having to re-render every time that we. So how do we do that? Let's go back to the code. In the app.js, the app component, we can now comment this and uncomment this one here. So here we are using the useCallback. Okay, just put it there, and then inside here basically they still stay the same. So useCallback here is to prevent the to-do component from re-rendering if not necessary. So just use that keyword here, and then go back to this to-do.js. We also have to use the memo here as well. Okay, so import it from React. So this one here, it check for the prop changes. Every time that the prop changes, then this will be in use. And now the to-do component will only re-render when the to-do props changes. Whenever that this to-do props, okay, when the value it changes, then it will call this component. Then this to-do component will be re-render. Okay, and once you import it up here, then down here export default also have to use it. Okay, wrap it around this to do as well. So now let's take a look again on the screen. Let's just refresh this. Okay, now we are using the useCallback, right? So let me click on this button here. Okay, when I click on it, you can see it re-render, right? And what about if I click on this button, the plus sign? Will it show the child render or not? And as you can see, this time the to-do component is no longer re-render, right? And this will increase, of course, the performance, but only if I click on this button, then this component, the to-do component, is re-render. Okay, if this is not involving with this button, right, it will not re-render at all. So this is how we use the useCallback just to improve the performance. It returns a memoized callback function. In this case, the function called add to do. Hope you learn how to use the useCallback hooks in this video. We will learn about useMemo hook. Okay, so useMemo is used to optimize the performance, and it's quite similar to useCallback that I showed you in the last video. They both are used to optimize or to increase the performance. The difference is that the useCallback, it memoizes a function, while useMemo, it memoizes a value. Okay, so a value from a function. That's the difference. Now let's have a look at the app.js here. We have the num. All right, so by default the number is 1, and we have the button. So the button here call increment. When we click on this button, it will call this set num, and set num here it will +1. Okay, every time we click on the button. And we also have the child component as well. It take one property called number. Okay, so now let's have a look at the child component. here you can see we are using the useMemo, and have a look at the child here. Okay, so as seen, this is the property, okay, call number, and this is the number. All right, so here it is, memorize double number. Okay, so let's have a look what it does. So basically it will use the number that coming from the app.js here and multiply this by 2. We are here using the useMemo, and it takes 2 parameters. So the first one is this one, basically this is the function, and the second one here, this is the dependencies. Okay, so this is an array of dependencies. This is the second argument. All right, so it has 2 arguments. This is the first one, and this is the second one. And here in the return, basically we show the number. Okay, and down here we have the double number. So whenever that it return a result of this, okay, and it's stored in the memoized double number, and we want to show it right here under the number. Okay, so now let's have a look at the result, and we will also try to test this a few times. So here it is, guys. We have this result. Okay, the button called increment. By default it's set to 1, right? And when I click on this button, it will increase by 1. Okay, so here I click on it, the number will increase 1 each time. Okay, when I click on this, you can see it increase. And when you have a look at the double number, it multiply this by 2. All right, so now let's have a look again to the child component. What if I remove this useMemo? What happened? All right, so I remove this, and now let's go back here and take a look. Okay, I refresh number 1, but nothing happened. Nothing is showing in the double number. Why is that? Because let's go back here, the useMemo hook here, it memorized the result of the calculation. Okay, it memorized, it basically store inside this variable, right? That's how it memorized, that's how it store the value, okay, in this variable, and it show it in this variable as well. Okay, it's showing the double number, whatever the number we have here, it multiply by 2. Okay, so let's recap here again. The child component, the child functional component here, it receive a prop call number, and inside this component we are using the useMemo hook to calculate the value of double. Okay, it does the calculation, multiply the number by 2, and the useMemo hook, it take a function. Okay, so the first one here, this is the function, and then this is the first argument, it does the calculation, and the second argument here, this is an array of dependencies. Okay, in this case this is the number. All right, and this here it will return the result of the calculation and store it in this memoized double number. That's why we can see the result. Okay, that's why we can show it to the screen. And let's have a look again. What if I remove the number here, right? An array of dependencies. So whether we still see this or not. Okay, when I click on this, actually nothing is working here. Okay, so this is also required as well. Yep, that's pretty much it about the useMemo. Again, useMemo, it is used to optimize the performance. You can think of it as caching. And the main difference between useCallback, it memorizes the function, while useMemo, it memorizes a value coming from a function. In this video, we're going to be covering the useRef hook in React. This hook is very useful for creating the references to the DOM elements, and also to store the mutable value that need to be persisted across the renders. And we're going to also going over how to use the useRef hook. So sit back, relax, and now let's dive in. Okay, so useRef is a hook in React that allow you to create a reference to a DOM node or JavaScript object, and it's very useful when you need to access the DOM node directly. Okay, for example, to focus on an input and also to measure the size of an element. And this is the sample code. Basically, this code is when I click on this focus input, then you can see the input here is focus, and I can just type anything. All right. So now let's go back to the code and quickly try to explain you what this code does. Okay, so this example, the useRef it used, okay, it's import up here. It's used to create a reference to the input element. Okay, so the useRef is used and it's called input ref. And here it is used in this ref attribute on the input element. So basically this line, it create a link to this useRef. So these two now have connection. All right. And here the button, whenever that we click on the button, the handle click is called. Okay, so this function is called, and inside this functions we have the input ref that use the current property, and this current property access the input element and also call the focus functions. When I click on this, then it will call this function, and this function is connecting with this input element, right? So now let's go back to the code and quickly try that out again. So I click on this, then this input element is focus, because in the function we define the current property with the focus method. Okay. Now let me just copy this code and also put it up here. Let's just say this one is focus input test, but here in the on click I didn't put anything. All right, so just empty string. And now let's just save and go back here, and there are two buttons right now. So let's see when I click on this button whether we still have the focus or not. Okay, the focus on the input element. Okay, as seen, nothing happened, but when I click on this, it's focused. So again, the reason is in the function we use the input ref. All right, so this is the useRef, and we use the focus to focus on this input, right, with the ref attribute. So I hope you learn from this tutorial on how to use the useRef. So useRef, again, it is very powerful for creating references to the DOM element and also to store the mutable value that can be persist across the renders. So without having to re-render. So in this example, we just use the useRef for the input element. But if you want to see more example, let me know. I'll create the video for you. We're going to explore the use of useTransition hook in React version 18. So useTransition hook, it enables us to mark some state modifications as unimportant. Are you ready to take your React skill to the next level? Let's dive in and discover the magic of useTransition. Okay, so now this is the code that you see without using the useTransition, because I want to show you without using this useTransition first, and why do we need to use the useTransitions and how do we implement it. Okay, so basically we have the set name, all right, and the list. This is storing as an array, and we have the list size. So by default we set this to 10,000. We have the handle change as well, the function where we can basically type something in the input on the screen that I'll show you in a minute. And inside here we have the set name value and also the data list. We set this to an empty array which will be storing the value. Okay, so here this is the for loop starting from 0 and up until 10,000, and it loop through this one by one, and it will add the value. All right, so the value that we input in the text field, and this will push it one by one, storing into the data list. Okay, and once we have all of the value storing here, then we basically set it as the list. Okay, and we will storing in the list here. So the return here, this is the input where we can just type any value in the text box, and then we just want to loop through this one by one and show it to the screen. Okay, so this one again without using the useTransition. And now let me show you on the screen here. Let's refresh this. Let me zoom in a bit. Okay, so now let me type something. Okay, and notice how long it takes to render all of this. So let me just type random thing. Okay, I already finished typing and I'm still waiting for it. Okay, a few seconds before I can see the result, and this is the result that it shows. Basically it's showing one by one, right? The first character is A, then it will show this A for 10,000. all right, and then it will keep continue showing me the others as well, like AS. all right, as you can see, it take a while to show this, and then it go to the next one up until the very end here. And now you start to see the problem, right? Because our list is just so big and looping over 10,000 times, saving each value that we type and rendering it to the screen. It takes a lot of times, and this is the problem because the list state update occurs concurrently. Okay, it is very slow and also take about a few seconds for it to refresh. And this is not only 10,000. If I type something, as you can see here, a few characters like this, right? It just show me 10,000 times a few times. Okay, the list here is more than 10,000. And how do we solve this problem? And here, come back to the code. This is why we need to use the useTransitions. Okay, so useTransition here, it is a hook that enable us to make some state modifications as unimportant, as not important. Okay, so this state will be performed in parallels. Okay, in parallel with the other state update, so it happen parallelly. Okay, now let's just uncomment this code, right? And this here as well, wrapping around the code, the looping through, and also a set list, and also down here as well. So now let's uncomment this and try to save it. And what does this code do right now? Okay, so basically we import the useTransition that is introduced in the React version 18 from React. Okay, and this is how we declare it. It has the is pending, also start transition. Okay, and here we just wrap the code here with the start transition. We want to start the transitioning. Okay, and then right here, this is the is pending. If it is true, then it will show the loading text. Otherwise, it's going to render the list, and this one is not required right now. Okay, so let's save that again. Now let's see the result first, and then we come back and explain this code one by one. So here it is. We still have the same text box, but right now if I type something, notice we will see the text loading and also the list of whatever that I type. So I type something, right? As you can see, it's very quick. It shows the loading first, and then it will show whatever the text that I type. Okay, so this list here, it has 10,000 line, 10,000 record or value. Okay, so if I delete this, it also refresh the page right on the fly as well. So let's just say test. Okay, very quick without having to wait for a few seconds. Transition, as you can see, it render very quickly. So now let's go back to the code here. Okay, 1, 2, 3. So now let's go through the code one by one. So when we use the useTransition hook here, all right, it will use an array of two values. So one is the is pending variable. Okay, so this is the variable called is pending, and this is the function called start transition. All right. So while the code inside the start transition here is running, meaning that the isPending variable here will return true, will set to true. So when it's set to true, meaning that the slow state update here, it is running, and the isPending will then be set to false once the state update is finished. Okay, so the set list, when it finishes running, then the isPending is no longer set to true. It will then turn to false. While it is running, then the isPending is true. Okay, so it's just like the text you see. If it is pending, if it is yes, then meaning that it's still running. Otherwise, it finished running. It's no longer pending. Okay, it's as simple as that. Now for the useTransition here, it accepts a single callback. Okay, as in here, just one single callback, and it contains all of the code here that associated with the slow state update. All right, including the state setting here. And using this hook here, it basically informs React that our set list state update is of low priority. It's not important. Okay, so this is the use of the use transitions. And also the user will be able to interact with our application as well. They can click on the other button or click on the other tab. Okay, it has no effect at all. It doesn't slow the applications. And while again it is updating, the text here will showing as loading, and once it is finished loading, then it basically showing us the list of the value that it has already rendered. Now let's try to go back here. I'll show you again. All right. Okay, let's just say hello world. Okay, loading, and it's showing me this. If I type something else, then it will refresh this right on the fly, unlike the previous code that I show you, which take a lot of time to render and slow our application. So again, this is the use of the use transition. Welcome back to React Cheat Sheet part 13. This video we will learn about useDeferredValue hook. So what is it? So useDeferredValue hook, it let you intentionally defer updating values so that they don't slow down the other part of the app, of the page. Okay, and useDeferredValue is basically used to defer the calculations of a value until it is actually needed. So for example, if you want to use the useDeferredValue to defer the calculations of an expensive computation or fetching of data from an API until it is actually needed, and when the value is needed, useDefer will calculate it and return the result. So now let me show you what I mean by that. So basically this is the text field, and we have the text here, right? So when using the useDeferredValue, I can just type anything and then it defer, right? And then it slow down a little bit until it show me the result, and I can just type. Okay, so while I am typing, right, it just wait for a bit before showing the result. This is the use of useDefer. Okay, so it defer updating the value. And now let's have a look at the code. Let me explain you what it is. So basically we import the useDefer from React, and then here we have the text, set text, just set to empty string, right? And we have the input, basically what I show you. I just type something on the keyboard, right? So this is the input. We have the text here, and then on change, whatever that I type, it will then store into this text, and this tag here will then use here with the useDeferredValue, and then this defer text here will then pass to the child via the prop, right? So let's have a look at the child. So the child here, we have the text, which is coming from this one here, right? And then we have the function called slow list. So this basically the function here, right? It will render right here. I just show like 100. I will change to 200, and this basically will loop through this 100 times to show the whatever that I type onto the input text. Okay, so it will show the list 100 times, And then inside the function slow item here, so this function here basically do nothing. It just wait for 1 millisecond per item to just make the application slow, right? So that we can see the use of the useDeferredValue. We just want to see the result, right? Between using it or without using it, we just want to know the difference. So right here, this is basically showing the text. All right. So now let me just change this to 250. Okay. And for this example, we also use memo here as well, with the combination of using the useDefer, so that we can see the result here. So let me just type something, right? It differ a little bit, and then it update the state. And now let me show you without using useDefer. So what happened? Okay, so here we don't want to use the useDefer, right? With the useDeferredValue here, we can just simply pass the text here. So just pass it right here, meaning that the application now is not using this hook at all. So let now have a look again. Let's refresh this. So now let me type something. Okay, when I type, it just stuck right here for a few seconds. Okay, so if I type one character, then it will just render the list 250 times before I can start typing again. So this is without using the useDeferredValue. Okay, so once I start typing, right, it just update immediately. And if I type fast, okay, it just stuck right here, right? I wait for a few seconds now, and it's still nothing happened. Okay, so this is why we want to use the useDeferredValue. Okay, I can just type anything I want, and then once I finish typing, then it start updating the state. So without using the useDeferredValue, each keystroke, okay, that I type, it forces the entire list to re-render immediately. Okay, so this is something that we don't want. And once I start using the useDeferredValue here, it just let me type without waiting. Okay, so typing, it feels snappy while the list is lag behind it. Okay, so once I finish typing, then it start updating. So now you learn the use of the useDeferredValue. Okay, so the purpose of using this is to optimize our application. So this make our applications feel a lot smoother and also faster as well. So that's pretty much it for this video, and I will see you guys in the next video.